In the day, back when you and I were in school, James, 1913, the role of course, central banks were then, by and large, investor-owned institutions that were, most of them doing a conventional commercial banking business of some kind, and they presented their they presented a balance sheet that was meant to be and did indeed conform to the orthodox norms of the day. They were they had no overt state support. They were not recapitalized by the state intermittently. They were, to a great degree, private, independent institutions in fact, and they were solvent. On a mark, the People's Bank of China is certainly insolvent. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York is visibly solvent and could certainly receive succor from the Treasury would it need arise. And you know, I mean to press the point that the leverage ratios are extreme. They are obviously extreme, but I think the symbolism of that extremism in leverage is important because it signifies how far off the path of gold standard orthodoxy we have veered in about 100 years. Way off the path.
Yeah, way off the path, and ultimately that leverage has to be reduced because we've reached a level that the cash flow just doesn't sustain that level of debt anymore. I mean, Greece perhaps is the poster child of over leverage, but there are any other number of countries you can point to.
America is a pretty good poster child for over leverage.
Well, I know you've been following this for a long time. I remember, was it 1992 you did the first prospectus of the U.S. government debt?
I think even earlier.
Was it even earlier?
Yes. Notice how many people paid attention. You paid attention.
I remember. But a lot of people are paying attention now. And I mean, okay, maybe you're a little bit early in terms of pointing out some of the problems.
20 years is nothing. 30 years is nothing.
Well, take the long view, right?
It does. Yeah.
But let's talk about the U.S. government's position. It seems basically insolvent, right?
Well, it's not insolvent. I mean, this is still the world's destination. It's a great country. Were we to mobilize our economic and financial resources, we could certainly deal with it. I think we could deal with the debts as they are now.
Even as big as they are,
including
the contingent liabilities?
Well, we would. I think if we dealt with those contingent liabilities, if people retired later. I mean, I think there's a way out. Still, I'm not such an apocalyptic observer of our fiscal affairs. However, our fiscal affairs are facilitated. We are addicted to our reserve currency privilege, which is in fact not a privilege but a curse. And insofar as we persist in paying our bills with the currency that only we can produce, and insofar as our mercantilist Asian creditors return the dollars we remit to them instantly in the shape of investments in our Treasury securities, we are certainly running down the path, not merely trotting, but running down the path of national insolvency because there's no check on our incontinence.
Yes.
That is the rub. Paul Ryan is a well-intended man with a serious program, but he doesn't address the problem. The problem is the reserve currency aspect of our monetary affairs.
Which, as you say, is a curse, but it's also a responsibility in a sense that if we maintain a bad reserve currency, this has worldwide impact.
Well, sure, and there's a great big discontinuity in our affairs. The dollar is the world's currency, but the Fed is America's central bank. Period. Pays no attention to anything outside the 50 states and territories, I guess. It doesn't care at all. In fact, I think it is not so secretly rooting for a much weaker exchange rate, but it doesn't care that $2 trillion of our assets, where the number really is on the balance sheet, are on the balance sheet of the People's Bank of China. They didn't care that half of Asia seems papered with our green currency. The Fed's in the business of ginning up the stock market. It's in the business of sustaining full employment as defined these days, which is a very loose definition indeed. It's in the business of promoting what they are pleased to call price stability. Nothing about what you rightly call the responsibility of issuing a reserve currency country. In fact, there's only been 2 reserve currency issuing countries, if you don't count the intended reserve currency status of the Eurozone, ourselves and Britain. Mm-hmm. And notice how little attention either one of us paid over the years since at least on paper, to our obligations to our creditors, like zero.
And the dollar only became a world reserve currency because of the link to gold, as the saying was back then, as good as gold.
Yeah.
And basically Britain, when it was on the classical gold standard, the term gold and pound were synonymous with one another because of the
Yeah.
redeemability features.
Well, I guess there was some connection as well to geopolitical power, but certainly, James, to me, the remarkable thing about the dollar now is that it is still accepted as a unit of medium of exchange and still a store of value the world over, without anything behind it except the good intentions of the issuing government. It is truly, if you stop and think about it, to me it is one of the most remarkable achievements in the history of money. The dollar does serve this role without anything behind it except Congress and the analytical acuity of the Federal Open Market Committee. It's quite something.
But I mean, fiat currencies around the world are accepted on the same basis until some event occurs.
Right.
And, people's
But
eyes open up.
It's been 40 years. This is a pretty long run.
Yeah,
for the
it
dollar.
is. But
I'm not saying it's going to be in perpetuity.
and we're not going to go another 40 years even.
No,
maybe,
but when you and
maybe 40 days.
when you and I still had dark hair, we were talking the same stuff. I'm trying to be a little bit discreet about timing.
Okay, thank you.
I hope I live long enough, but let me just say I'm impressed by the staying power of this fiat currency.
Yeah.
I am deeply impressed by it.
Yeah. What do you attribute that to? Just propaganda, lack of
No,
education.
well, that's part of it, I suppose. But we take for granted the fact that the United States still has the Statue of Liberty, Disney World, the New York Public Library, the United States Marine Corps. This is a great country. It is the world's destination for people, and to a degree, still it is the world's destination for wealth and for opportunity. The United States is like Major League Baseball. They try to destroy it, but they can't.
But it's not like what I remember, back in the 70s or 60s, or even as a young kid in the 50s, in terms of attraction for capital.
I know, but still, I guess what I'm trying to say is there is a lot of inertial power behind this country and its magnetism for people and for enterprise.
Staying power, but at the end of the day, a currency, if it ultimately.
Yes, of course. Yes, we agree on that.
Yeah.
So every paper currency has gone to zero. The dollar is down, 99.99% or something.
Since 1913, yeah.
Right. It is a truism to say that these paper currencies are going to zero. However, I've been around a long time watching it go to zero, and and Ben Esperanke still gets more TV time than I do. Let me put it that way.
Okay.